So for my project, I looked at the economic repercussions of corruption in Kenya, more specifically with the Goldenberg scandal in 1991. Right, and so if you could just ignore that I spelled scandal wrong, that would be great. So in 1991, Daniel Arap Moi was president, and under his regime, they passed a law that said that if you exported gold, you received a 35% rebate on the value of that gold, which seemed like a pretty good deal. And then the gold was exported to Goldenberg International Ltd and Exchange Bank Limited, located in Switzerland and Dubai. But there was no gold in Kenya. So basically all the money that was coming from the gold was going directly to Moi and his officials. And so by the end of the scandal, they actually had gained the same amount of money, like equivalent to the national debt at the time, which was, a crazy amount of money. But in 1994, the Goldenberg scandal came crashing down, and it ended up costing Kenya $600 million, which is a tenth of their GDP, like 10% of their GDP, which was just, a huge cost for the country. And so the economy was on the verge of collapse, and so they went into recession and had extremely slow growth afterwards. And, a ton of horrible things happened. Money supply went up 35%. Inflation rose at one point, it even reached 105%. Poverty, which was already at 48%, rose to 60%. Interest rates stayed really high. Public debt rose to $7.8 billion. And basically, because of all this instability, donors backed off. So the World Bank withheld $250 million because of instability and corruption. And then with the slow persecution of Moi after, the IMF cut aid. And even in 2000, the economy grew negative 0.2%, which meant that it actually shrunk, which was just the first time that the Kenyan economy had actually shrunk ever. And so the only upside to this was that it seemed that fiscal and monetary policies were actually influenced for the better. And so it seemed that they were, the Central Bank of Kenya made it so that politicians could only borrow 6% of their campaign strategy, whatever, funding from the Central Bank of Kenya, so that if they wanted to, use corruption to gain money, they would have to do it out in the open. And so they couldn't use loopholes through the CBK or anything. They would just have to kind of do it, much more openly and much less legally in a way. So in my little drawing, I have a corrupt politician actually going and knocking on people's doors, asking for money, even though it's not actually how it happens, but just for the sake of this project, that's how it happens. So in 2002, Mwai Kibaki was elected president under the National Rainbow Coalition, and once he stepped into office, the coalition basically said, okay, it's going to be, they essentially pledged to combat corruption. And so they examined the Goldenberg scandal and kind of informed the public on everything that happened, and the Kenyan population was basically just amazed to see how much money was wasted, especially in a country where so many people are in poverty and so many people live on less than $1 a day. And so everybody wanted Moi to be prosecuted, but the only problem was that the NARC, the National Rainbow Coalition, was corrupt themselves. So it's kind of like, how can you expect somebody who was corrupt to prosecute another, person who was corrupt? And so it just kind of says something that even the people trying to combat corruption are corrupt. And then even in 2011, the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission was disbanded for some reason and replaced with the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. But it just seemed to be a superficial kind of thing, just for the books, just to kind of please people, but it doesn't actually have any real effect. And so kind of looking forward, Kenya has recently been known as the economic motor of East Africa. And even since the Goldenberg scandal, they now have a growth rate of 6%, which is really great. But there is a clear link between corruption and decreasing security. Decreasing security being, instability and corruption. And So basically, ambassadors and kind of everybody else has made this connection, but nothing is being done about it. And they've kind of recognized that if corruption doesn't stop, then they're not really going to get investors, because investors have this fear that because of Somalia and Ethiopia, Islamic terrorist groups are going to invade the Kenyan government in its weak states of corruption. And so they don't want to invest in case if that happens, and they would really rather invest in a stable economy elsewhere anyways. And so, if there are no investors, this country can't really go anywhere. This economy can't grow as much as, to its full potential. And so now it's just kind of seeing, because efforts in the past have been so, unsuccessful, it's just kind of seeing what can we do now, to help. And, a lot of people have offered help, but I think it's just a matter at this point of figuring out the right deal and kind of having somebody go in there and, with a hands-on effort, because nothing really seems to be working when the Kenyan government themselves tries to do it.